Hey everybody, I want to talk to you a little bit today about the Aiken Bible. Now, even if you don't recognize the name Aiken Bible, this is the Bible that the Christian nationalist historical revisionists are referring to when they claim that Congress in 1782 printed a Bible for the use of schools. This was already one of the most popular of all the Christian nationalist history lies. And these lies are gaining a whole new audience now that David Barton has teamed up with Glenn Beck. And Barton has made several appearances on Beck, which have propelled his 15-year-old book, Original Intent, to #1 constitutional law book on Amazon.com, which would be funny if it wasn't so scary. Anyway, here's a few clips of Barton talking about the Aiken Bible as seen on Glenn Beck.
What I hold here is the first Bible written in English, printed in English, from the United States. And how many of these are in existence?
They printed 10,000 of them in 1782, and there's 22 left in private hands today.
22. My gosh. Worth a lot of money?
Worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
Worth a lot of money.
It's right here. What does it say right here on the second page? I don't know if you can grab this, but right here, what is it?
The quote, this Bible, by the way, is done by Congress, and it says, "Resolved, the United States and Congress assembled recommend this edition of the Bible to the inhabitants of the United States."
Oh. So right here, the first Bible written, printed in English was printed, can you please hold this because I'm afraid the whole thing's going to fall apart. Printed by Congress. By Congress. Can you imagine getting that?
Let me goof this up even more.
Yeah.
Because the official records of this Bible being printed said that this Bible was, quote, "a neat edition of the Holy Scriptures for the use of our schools," end quote. So,
where do we start here?
Let's start with the overall group. Let's just start, let me start with this book right here. This came out of Continental Congress. This is the rarest, one of the rarest books in America. That little jewel right there is the first Bible printed in English in America.
Where am I going? Up here? One of the first Bibles printed in
English in America, and it was printed by those guys right there. That Congress printed that Bible, and the original congressional documents say that that Bible is, quote, "a neat edition of the Holy Scriptures for the use of our schools," end quote.
I'm sorry. What?
"A neat edition of the Holy Scriptures for the use of our schools," end quote. And in the front of that Bible, it has a congressional endorsement recommending
But everyone
that Bible.
will tell you separation of church and state.
And that's what they wanted. They're the guys who came up with that. So I think they know what the definition is.
Okay. How many of these are left?
There's 22 left in private hands. They printed 10,000 in Congress, and there's 22 left, and that's one of the 22 right there.
Okay.
Congress didn't print this Bible, let alone print it for the use of schools. This is a flat-out lie, and one that I've debunked on a number of occasions. So I'm just going to use a video clip here from a video I made last year that begins with Barton's expanded version of this lie that he uses in his longer presentations.
Jump ahead 5 years. Let me jump to the end of the American Revolution. The final battle in the American Revolution is the Battle of Yorktown. The British laid down their arms, which meant we're finally out from under the laws of the kings. Great British law doesn't control us anymore. The significance of that is one of the British laws had said that if you live in America, you cannot print a Bible in the English language in America. We had an established church, and whatever the king was, that's what we used. He's a Catholic, we'll use a Catholic Bible. He's an Anglican, we'll use an Anglican Bible. But whatever it is, he'll tell us which one to use. You cannot print a Bible in English language in America. It's illegal. Now, we printed a lot of Bibles in America. John Eliot printed Bible 1661. He's an apostle of the Indians. But he printed that Bible in the Massachusetts Indian language. We printed Bibles in Massachusetts Indian language, Cherokee, Ojibwe, Shawnee. We printed in French and Italian and Russian and Spanish and Greek and Latin. You name it, we printed it, but we'd never printed a Bible in English until after we whipped the British at Yorktown. Now, having done that, we're out from under the laws, and so we can do that. So within a month of what happened at Yorktown, the first proposal is made to print the first English language Bible in America. It rolls off the presses in September of 1782, and when it rolled off the presses, there were 20,000 copies that were printed. Now, today there's only 29 copies left in the world. I've been very blessed. I have an original copy. Library of Congress has one. One of the rarest books in the world is called the Bible of the Revolution. This is what it looks like. And that Bible printed in 1782, you know who printed the first English language Bible in America? The Congress of the United States printed it. Congress did. Why would the Founding Fathers print a Bible? They tell you why they printed the Bible. It's in the records of Congress. It's in the front of the Bible. They said that this Bible is, quote, a neat addition to the Holy Scriptures for the use of our schools, end quote. Whoa! I thought the Founding Fathers didn't want the Bible in schools. That's what we've been taught in the last several decades. You know, the first time ever we took the Bible out of American schools was by a Supreme Court decision called Avenue v. Shem, June the 25th of 1963. For 360 years before that, we kept the Bible in schools. The last 40 years, we've had it out, and somehow we think that's the way it's always been. Not so. Matter of fact, here's the original congressional document. You can read it. A neat addition to the Holy Scriptures for the use of schools. This Bible even has a congressional endorsement in the front. Resolved, the United States and Congress assembled recommend this edition of the Bible to the inhabitants of the United States.
This Bible was not printed by Congress. That is a flat-out lie. It was privately printed by Robert Aiken, a Philadelphia printer. Now, there are many versions of this story in the revisionist history books, all worded to mislead that Congress either printed the Bibles, requested the printing of the Bibles, granted Aiken permission to print them, contracted him to print them, paid for the printing, or had the Bibles printed for the use of schools. Congress did none of these things. All they did was grant one of the many requests made by Aiken by having their chaplains examine his work and allowing him to publish their resolution stating that based on the chaplain's report, they were satisfied that his edition was accurate. Congress also had another reason for endorsing Aiken's work. The resolution also acknowledged that Aiken's accomplishment in printing as large a book as the Bible was, quote, an instance of the progress of arts in this country. Publicizing the accuracy of his work was a great way for Congress to promote the American printing industry. Now, few American printers at this time were printing books. Most limited their businesses to broadsides, pamphlets, and newspapers, and the few books that were being printed in America were not only more expensive than those imported from England, but they had a reputation for being full of errors. Congress knew that once the war was over and books could once again be imported, any progress that the wartime book shortage was causing in the American printing industry would end. The war had created an opportunity for American printers to prove themselves, and Congress wanted it known that Robert Aiken had done just that. Of course, this aspect of the resolution is omitted by the revisionists to make it appear that Congress passed this resolution for the sole purpose of promoting religion. Now, Aiken's Bible was not printed after the end of the Revolutionary War, as Barton claims. What Barton does here is to shift the date that Aiken began printing his Bible to make it fit the timeline of his story. He needs for Aiken not to have begun printing his Bible until 1782. Why? Because it was in September of 1782 that Congress passed the resolution endorsing it. Remember, what Barton is claiming here is that it was Congress who printed these Bibles. So this 1782 resolution has to be what allowed Aiken to begin printing. If Aiken was printing his Bible before this, Barton's whole story falls apart. So here's the real timeline that, well, makes Barton's whole story fall apart. Aiken actually began printing his Bible in 1780. By January of 1781, he had already written to Congress requesting that the chaplains examine his work, meaning, of course, that he had enough of it printed at that time, over a year and a half before Barton claims that it even began rolling off the presses, to demonstrate to the chaplains that his work was accurate. But Barton claims that within a month of the victory at Yorktown, the first proposal was made to print the first English-language Bible. Now, the Battle of Yorktown was in October 1781, 10 months after Aiken's January 1781 memorial to Congress. But Barton needs to somehow connect the go-ahead for Aiken's Bible printing to Yorktown, and here's why. The resolution endorsing Aiken's work was passed in 1782, but the peace treaty ending the war wasn't signed until 1783. So right off the bat, Barton needs an earlier event that he can say was the end of the war and the point at which the United States were no longer under British law. Now, the United States were, of course, out from under British law as of 1776 when the Declaration of Independence was signed, and the fact that Barton's audience doesn't catch this little problem with his story just shows how little they know about the most basic facts of American history. If you were to ask someone who's learned American history from the books of Barton and the other revisionists what they knew about the Declaration, well, You'd hear that it acknowledged a creator, that its signers placed their reliance on divine providence, and that there were 27 things in it that were taken straight from the Bible. Now, they won't be able to tell you what these 27 things are, but they will parrot this claim anyway and adamantly insist that it's true. What won't they be able to tell you about the Declaration of Independence? Well, that it was a Declaration of Independence, that it was the document declaring that the United States were independent and no longer under British rule. And this utter ignorance among his audience about American history is why Barton can so easily fool them with his Aiken Bible story, a story that relies entirely on the fallacy that it wasn't until the end of the war that the British Bible printing law no longer had to be obeyed. So all Barton has to do is play with a few dates at the end of the war to make Robert Aiken's Bible roll off the presses in September of 1782. And his audience is easily duped into believing that it was the 1782 resolution of Congress that allowed the printing, and that, in fact, it was Congress itself that printed the Bible. But Barton goes even farther than this, claiming that Congress not only printed this Bible, but printed it for the use of schools. He even shows what he calls a congressional document that says the Bible was, quote, a neat edition of the Holy Scriptures for the use of schools. But this congressional document was not a document written by Congress. It was a document written by Robert Aiken and sent to Congress. Of course, this document is in the records of Congress, but that's just because all memorials to Congress, whether their requests were granted or not, are in the records. But by using words like congressional document and records of Congress, Barton leads his audience to believe that this document he's showing was written by Congress. Now, even with the endorsement of its accuracy by the chaplains of Congress and the fact that the United States had been without a supply of Bibles since trade with Britain was cut off at the beginning of the war 6 years earlier, Aiken couldn't sell his Bibles. Apparently, there just wasn't as big a demand for Bibles as he had anticipated. So what did Aiken do? He asked Congress to buy some of his Bibles and distribute them to the states. This request was flatly denied, as were all of Aiken's other requests, that his Bible, quote, be published under the authority of Congress and that he be commissioned or otherwise appointed and authorized to print and vend editions of the sacred scriptures. And Barton also says in his presentation that this Bible was called the Bible of the Revolution, but it was never called that at the time. This title was made up in 1930 by two entrepreneurs who were trying to sell the individual leaves of a dismembered Aiken Bible. They took the leaves along with facsimiles of various documents related to the Bible and had them made into books that they marketed with the title, The Bible of the Revolution. Now, when Congress officially declared the end of hostilities in April 1783, Aiken, who hadn't been able to sell his Bibles even without any competition from imports, made one last-ditch effort to unload his Bibles on Congress, this time to give his gifts to soldiers who were being discharged. Now, Aiken knew that Congress would probably deny this request if he made it himself, so he had a prominent minister friend, Dr. John Rogers, write to George Washington, suggesting not only that Congress buy the Bibles for the soldiers, but that Washington proposed the idea as if it was his own. Washington politely said no. So Robert Aiken ended up losing his shirt in his Bible printing venture. In fact, the reason his Bible is now such an incredibly rare book is that so few of them were ever sold, and most of them, after being stored for a while, were eventually just thrown out. Now, the last chapter of the Aiken Bible saga is that it was actually Aiken himself who started exaggerating Congress's role in the printing of his Bibles. In 1790, the then flat-broke Robert Aiken very brazenly wrote to President Washington, using his losses from his Bible printing as the reason that Washington should help him get the job of printer and stationer to Congress. In his letter, Aiken exaggerated the involvement of Congress in his failed 1782 printing, asserting that Congress had solicited the printing, claiming that, quote, the scarcity of that valuable book was such as to claim the attention of Congress and excite their solicitude for a supply, and that the book was undertaken in a great measure at the instance and under the patronage of Congress. In other words, it was Congress's fault that he was broke, so Congress should give him a job. Washington didn't even answer this letter himself, but had his secretary replied to Aiken that if he wanted to be the printer to Congress, he should apply to Congress.